If you grew up in a time when movies were well made, then when anyone talks about the Ark of the Covenant, pictures of a studly, rough and ready Indiana Jones might flit through your imagination.
I hate snakes, Chuck!
In fact, the writers of the Raiders of the Lost Ark must have been familiar with the biblical stories about the Ark and its immense power. That is because, like in the movies, at many times in the biblical epic, the Ark wreaks havoc on entire nations. Also, corrupt political leaders use it for unjust gain, and if you're not careful, the power of God may break out against you. Thus, it is no wonder that this mysterious artifact has fascinated readers of the Bible for centuries. In fact, the biblical story of the Ark has sparked the imagination of writers long before Lucas or Spielberg. Ancient Jewish commentaries like the Midrash claim that the Ark would clear the path for the nation of Israel by burning snakes, scorpions, and thorns with 2 jets of flame that shot from its underside. Where another Midrash says that rather than being carried by its bearers, the Ark, in fact, carried its bearers inches above the ground. Of course, these fascinating tales are attempts to communicate the power and holiness that the Ark held. In reality, this power was the presence of God. Spiritually, the Ark was the manifestation of God's physical presence on earth, the Shekinah. While the physical presence may have fascinated modern and ancient readers, the biblical reality of the Ark of the Covenant is at one time far more powerful and mysterious, and at another, far more beautiful and obvious than we could ever dream up. So if you've ever wondered where the Ark went and how it got there, then stick around, because this is Bible Unbound, and we are here to explore the story of the Ark of the Covenant. Let's explore. In the beginning, God commanded Moses to build an ark while Israel was encamped at Sinai.
The Ark of the Covenant.
Not to be confused with Noah's Ark, this vessel was rather small. It was designed to house the covenant that God had made with Israel, represented in the 10 Commandments. The artifact was handcrafted by Bezalel and carried on poles by the Levitical subtribe of Kohath. The ark was a small wooden box overlaid with gold and decorated with intricate carvings, while 2 cherubim sat on top, touching wing to wing. While it would be logical to say that the ark went with Israel, it would be perhaps more accurate to say that Israel went where the ark led them. When Israel left Sinai, they did so because God's presence had moved, thus Kohath set out first with the ark ahead of all of Israel. For nearly a century, the ark and Israel traveled together inseparably, which is why we find the ark with Israel wandering through the wilderness for 40 years before coming to the banks of the Jordan. Then the ark became the focal point of how Israel miraculously crossed the Jordan into the Promised Land. Immediately after crossing the Jordan into Canaan, Israel encamped at Gilgal, and so did the ark. Before finally the ark was carried into the first battle that Israel would face against the Canaanites. Here, the ark's full power was made clear. Israel carried it around Jericho for 7 days. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. Afterward, Israel gave a loud shout and blew the trumpets, and the walls of Jericho fell down. The ark must have then quickly been relocated after this encounter. We don't hear about the ark playing any significant role in the rest of the Canaanite conquest. The next time the Ark of the Covenant is displayed, it is at the end of the Joshua narrative, while Joshua divides the land at Shiloh. Simply, the ark then remained at Shiloh for the next 400 years. Perhaps this is because Shiloh represents a centralized location within Israel, Or perhaps this was the first sign of the Ark of the Covenant fading into the background of Israelite life. So the Ark remained at Shiloh for nearly 400 years. Periodically, it seems that the Ark would be moved from Shiloh to Bethel under the leadership of High Priest Phinehas. This could be due to the lack of the trust that Phinehas had in God, or perhaps because the tent was mobile, it could be assumed that the Ark often moved with the tent, but then was always put back at Shiloh. Regardless, by the time Samuel was a young boy, the Ark was housed at Shiloh under the priesthood of Eli. The power of the Ark at Jericho must have stayed in the minds of the Israelites. For when Saul finds himself defeated at the hands of the Philistines, he makes the Levites carry the Ark from Shiloh to the battlefield. The hope is that as God defeated Jericho, so he too would defeat the Philistines, whom Saul had begun a war with. This story in Saul's reign perhaps marks the downfall of his kingdom. It would seem that Saul believed that the power of God was a superstitious power used for winning political favor. So when the Philistines cleanly defeat the Israelites because of Saul and his hubris, they capture the Ark to symbolize the defeat of God and his people. Therefore, the Ark was held in Philistia for 7 months. During this time, the Ark of the Covenant wreaked havoc on the Philistine nation. After all, they too wanted it because of their political pride. They put the Ark in the temple of Dagon in Ashdod. The next morning, Dagon was found face down before the Ark. The image of Dagon worshiping the true God and King here is difficult to miss. Moreover, the Philistine town Ashdod found themselves riddled with severe plagues. Therefore, the Philistines, wanting to rid themselves of the Ark's power, moved it to Gath. There, massive tumors began breaking out against the inhabitants. So they sent the Ark away to Ekron, which of course immediately became infested with mice. So the Philistines concede. Dagon truly must have no power against the God of Israel. The Philistines send the Ark back with a guilt offering. The guilt offering was of golden mice and tumors. It's likely a form of sympathetic magic that was common in the ancient world. Ultimately, this can be interpreted as a form of irony. The Gentile Philistine nation was faster and more eager to respect and give the God of Israel glory than Israel, the people of God, had been. Then the Philistine leaders send the Ark away wandering on 2 cows. The cows miraculously find their way to Beth Shemesh, where the Lord strikes the unfaithful Israelites who even look at the Ark. That is why Israelites from Kiriath Jearim take it to their town. And the Ark stayed at Kiriath Jearim in the house of Abinadab for 20 years. In the meantime, Saul was still engrossed with his Philistine war and attempted to use the Ark again to gain victory. The Israelite warriors snatch the Ark away from the sons of God in Kiriath Jearim and take it to the battlefield. This time, the Lord does win the battle for Israel, but one could argue that Israel loses the war here. For this is the moment wherein Saul begins to track the Philistines across the Israelite countryside for days on end. Due to sheer exhaustion, Saul makes an unrealistic and rash vow, and this action causes a lot of people to die and ultimately Saul's dethronement over Israel. Therefore, once Saul dies and David takes over, David is going to be met with a choice. Will he respect the Ark of the Covenant, or will he use it for unjust personal gain like Saul and the Philistines? Here, you would expect David to entreat the Lord's guidance, and he does not. Instead, David goes to the house of Abinadab from Baale-Judah to transport the Ark to his new capital, Jerusalem. For this journey, David constructs a new cart for the Ark and places it between 2 oxen, reminiscent of the way Philistia treated the vessel. But while carrying the Ark, one of those oxen stumbles, and a priest, Uzzah, reaches out his hand to grab it, and the Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down, and he died there beside the Ark of God. Okay, so while much can be said about this passage, it is likely that the author wants you to empathize first and foremost with David, Israel, and Uzzah here. Questions over the justice of God, the error of Uzzah, the foolishness of David should flash through our minds when we read this story. Indeed, this is a disorienting story, and it was designed to be. We can know this because David too was disoriented. David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out, Peretz, against Uzzah. And to this day, that place is called Perez Uzzah. So you don't have to be ashamed of your frustration here. Joyce G. Baldwin, in her commentaries on Samuel, makes sense of it this way. Though Jesus taught us to call God our Father, he also taught us to pray, "Hallowed be thy name," implying the need to pay careful attention lest privilege becomes presumption. Likely, that is the potent purpose for this cautionary tale. David had the choice before him to respect the ark, the presence of God, or not. In contrast, Saul and his Israel did not respect the ark. So, before we rationalize, let us first feel. Regardless, narratively speaking, the story is vital, and it needs to be in the Bible. From it, we may conclude that conviction comes in many ways. You see, after this incident, David says he was afraid of the Lord that day, and he said, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" David's conviction that God's presence must be respected will then guide the rest of his kingly ministry. In fact, David's success and failures could even be read in light of this one story. Therefore, one may argue that because of Uzzah's death, David could reign justly, and thus Jesus could live. Due to David's newfound reverence for God's powerful presence, David rethinks his plan to take the ark to Jerusalem. Instead, David diverts and leaves the ark at Obed-Edom, where it stays for 3 months. Obed-Edom, by the way, was likely the Kohathite named in 1 Chronicles 26:4, sanctioned to carry the ark. After 3 months, David brings the ark to Jerusalem. And when those who bore the ark of the Lord had gone 6 steps, David sacrificed an ox and a fattened animal. There, it was kept for the rest of its days. Now, there was a time when Absalom murdered his brother Amnon and attempted a coup that the ark was moved. David was forced to flee Jerusalem. There, Zadok, the high priest, thought to bring the ark to David. But David refuses and commands them to carry it back to Jerusalem. This important epilogue to the ark narrative shows us that David believes in God, not superstition. Indeed, the words of Psalm 144 echo this tale. It's a psalm of David. God is my steadfast love and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield and in whom I take refuge, who subdues people under me. This is a sharp contrast to the Sauls of the world who believed the ark had magical powers of deliverance. Zadok faithfully carries the ark back to Jerusalem, and there, it was most likely then later housed in Solomon's temple. The ark remained in the temple until its destruction at the hand of the Babylonian Empire led by Nebuchadnezzar. This is when the ark finds its final end. The most tumultuous years in the life of Jerusalem occurred from about 605 to 586 BC. And in those 19 years, Judah was ruled by 5 different kings, all of whom seemed to have been forced into power by the surrounding nations. So, when Egypt betrayed their alliance to Judah, they deported King Jehoahaz and placed Jehoiakim in power. Consequently, Jeremiah was then also taken captive to Egypt. Then, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, forced Zedekiah to be put in charge, who later rebelled against Babylon. This caused the Babylonian captivity. Zedekiah was captured, forced to watch his family killed, and then blinded before being bound in bronze chains and taken as a slave to Babylon. Meanwhile, Nebuchadnezzar burned Jerusalem to the ground. The NIV makes the irony even more clear at what happened after this. The Babylonians stripped the temple in Jerusalem of all the bronze in order to make shackles for prisoners. Presumably, Therefore, the ark was then dismantled and smelted to waste away as artifacts found by archaeologists across the world throughout time. This makes the most sense, honestly, historically as well, because in the ancient world, when one nation overthrew another, the idea was that the stronger nation destroyed the god of the weak nation. Most religious artifacts, therefore, were destroyed, epitomizing the weakness of the fledgling god. Luckily, the Most High does not dwell in houses made by human hands. Therefore, I'd have to apologize to our Raiders of the Lost Ark fans. Like the Babylonians, a tyrannical empire like Hitler's Germany would have seen the fiscal profit in the presence of God. Most likely, the Ark was destroyed immediately. Regardless, even if archaeological evidence proves this whole video wrong, we should take our cue from David. That's the point of this story. The Ark is not a supernatural or superstitious artifact to be used and abused. But like most things in the Bible, the Ark is both a historic reality, the actual presence of God, and a symbol. It was the symbol of God's presence in Israel, and how it comes up in the story is a theological claim. This is why skeptics who talk about the Ark as a means to harness electricity or hidden away in some dusty cave are not actually paying attention to the source material. The Ark was communicating a greater reality, the reality of God's manifest presence. Therefore, you would be hard-pressed to find a Christian theologian who does not see the similarities between the Ark of God's covenant and Jesus. Of course, if you're a Roman Catholic, you've probably heard the similarities might be between the Ark and Mary, but regardless, the Ark, first and foremost, contained the law of Moses, the Ten Commandments. Jesus came as the Word of God incarnate, fulfilling that law. The Ark contained a jar of manna. Jesus was the bread of life. The Ark held Aaron's staff. Jesus came with signs and wonders, particularly the sign of new life in his authority. That's the full meaning of Aaron's staff in the Ark. The mercy seat of the Ark acted as the mediator. Jesus came as the mediator between God and man. The Ark was always present at moments of salvation and deliverance. Jesus is the salvation and deliverance for all mankind. The Ark was unjustly used for personal and political gain. Jesus was betrayed for silver and hung on a Roman cross to appease the crowd. The Ark was likely stripped and sold for money. Jesus' clothes were stripped and divided among the soldiers. Whereas the Ark itself did not save the Israelites, so too a cross around our necks, our weekly church attendance, will not save us. It is God, and God alone, who saves. The God who parted the Jordan and who is redeeming all of creation. You see, David was wise to fear the Lord. We should also see God as hallowed. Where the Ark has filled the imagination of storytellers for centuries, we ought to let Jesus fill our imagination too. For Jesus is the full realization of the Ark. After all, he is the manifest presence of God on earth. Truly, Jesus is the Shekinah of Yahweh. This was Bible Unbound. We'll see you next time. Hey, Austin here. Just a quick reminder about Bible Unbound and the content you just watched, which was supported by our funders over on patreon.com. Patreon is where you try to get a bunch of people to donate small amounts to fund a mission. And the mission of Bible Unbound is to discover the Bible by uncovering the gospel. You see, we are passionate about creating a community of people who want to see Bible-curious people understand the Bible by seeing the gospel and Jesus proclaimed throughout the entire thing. And so if you want to fund that mission, if you want to become a part of the vision we have over here at Bible Unbound, you can explore more of that over on patreon.com. We'd love to see you there. Thanks so much.